Ancient Greece. Just a name evokes images of towering marble temples, great minds debating under the sun, and epic battles fought beneath the gaze of the gods. But beyond the myths and monuments, ancient Greece was a complex and fascinating civilization, filled with innovations, contradictions, and a legacy that still shapes the modern world. Let's explore some of the most surprising and captivating facts about this remarkable culture. To begin with, ancient Greece wasn't a single unified country. It was made up of city-states, known as polis, each with its own government, military, laws, and customs. Some were monarchies, others oligarchies, and a few, like Athens, were early forms of democracy. These city-states were often in competition, and sometimes outright war with one another, yet they shared a common language, religion, and cultural identity. The most famous of these city-states, Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and Thebes, each left their own unique mark on history. Let's talk about democracy. Athens is often hailed as the birthplace of democracy, and while this is true, the system was very different from what we know today. Only male citizens over the age of 18 who had completed military training were allowed to participate. That excluded women, slaves, and foreigners, who, combined, made up the majority of the population. Citizens could vote directly on laws in large assemblies, a form of direct democracy that put immense power in the hands of a relatively small group. Still, the core idea that ordinary people could have a voice in government was revolutionary. Now consider philosophy. Ancient Greece is a homeland of some of the most influential thinkers the world has ever known. Socrates, the enigmatic teacher who wandered the streets of Athens asking endless questions, never wrote anything down. Yet his ideas were preserved by his student Plato, who built a philosophical system that explored everything from justice to metaphysics. Plato, in turn, taught Aristotle, who became one of the most wide-ranging thinkers in human history, studying politics, biology, ethics, logic, and even drama. Their writings became the foundation of Western philosophy and continue to influence us today. Speaking of drama, did you know that the ancient Greeks invented theater as we know it? The origins of Western drama lie in religious festivals honoring Dionysus, the god of wine, fertility, and revelry. These festivals feature performances of tragedies and comedies, often exploring complex themes like fate, honor, love, and politics. Playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes brought human emotion and social commentary to the stage in a way no one had before. Their plays were performed in massive open-air theaters with remarkable acoustics, some of which are still in use today. Let's move to mythology, which was more than just stories. Greek mythology was a way of explaining the natural world, human behavior, and the mysteries of existence. The Greeks believed in a pantheon of gods and goddesses who lived on Mount Olympus. These deities weren't just symbols. They were vividly human in their desires, flaws, and rivalries. Zeus, the king of the gods, wielded thunderbolts. Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, was born from Zeus's head. Poseidon ruled the sea, Hades the underworld. Their tales explain the seasons, the stars, and even natural disasters. Myths weren't just bedtime stories. They were woven into daily life, worship, politics, and art. Another deeply rooted tradition in ancient Greece was athletic competition. The Olympic Games originated in 776 BC in the sanctuary of Olympia, dedicated to Zeus. These games were held every 4 years, and unlike modern events, the competitors were all male and competed nude. Events included running, wrestling, long jump, javelin, discus, and chariot racing. Winning was the highest honor a Greek man could achieve, and victors were celebrated as heroes, sometimes even worshipped. There were also penalties. Cheating athletes had to pay fines used to erect statues that publicly shamed them. Now, if you're imagining a society of warriors and philosophers, you're not wrong. But there was so much more. Ancient Greece was also a center of science, innovation, and mathematics. Archimedes, a mathematician and inventor from the city of Syracuse, developed early principles of calculus and invented war machines to defend his city. Hippocrates, the so-called father of medicine, laid the foundation for clinical observation and ethical standards in medical practice. Even the word planet comes from the Greek word for wanderer, reflecting their early astronomical observations. The Greeks were also highly artistic. Sculpture reached extraordinary heights, with lifelike forms carved in marble and bronze, capturing the ideal human body in motion and repose. These statues weren't just decorative. They expressed a Greek belief in balance, proportion, and the divine beauty of the human form. Architecture, too, followed strict principles. Temples like the Parthenon in Athens used subtle curves and optical illusions to appear perfectly straight and harmonious to the human eye. Let's not forget literature. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, composed around the 8th century BCE, are among the oldest surviving works of Western literature. The Iliad recounts the Trojan War, while the Odyssey follows a long journey of Odysseus back home. These epic poems were passed down orally for generations before being written down, and they continue to influence literature, film, and storytelling today. Now, while we often celebrate ancient Greece for its achievements, it's important to remember that it was not a utopia. Slavery was a foundational part of the economy and daily life. In Athens, it's estimated that up to 1/3 of the population were slaves, people who had no rights and could be bought, sold, or punished at will. Women, even in the enlightened city of Athens, were excluded from public life. They couldn't vote, own property independently, or receive formal education. In contrast, Spartan women had more freedom, owning land and receiving physical training, as Sparta valued strong mothers to produce strong warriors. Education in ancient Greece was also quite different depending on your status. In Athens, boys were educated in reading, writing, music, and physical fitness. They studied the art of public speaking and debate. Girls, if they were educated at all, learned domestic skills. In Sparta, education was entirely focused on preparing boys for warfare. From the age of 7, boys were taken from their families and raised in military barracks, learning survival, endurance, and combat skills. It was a harsh system, but it produced one of the most feared military forces in history. Trade and travel were vital to Greek life. With a landscape full of mountains and a jagged coastline, travel by land was difficult. So the Greeks took to the sea, becoming expert sailors and establishing colonies all across the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. These colonies helped spread Greek culture far and wide, and they brought back new ideas, materials, and technologies. Olive oil, wine, pottery, and silver were major exports. Markets, called agoras, were bustling centers not only of commerce, but also of public life, places where people discussed politics, philosophy, and daily affairs. Language was another powerful tool. The Greek alphabet, developed from the Phoenician script, became the basis for Latin and many modern alphabets. Greek words and roots are embedded in English today, especially in science, medicine, philosophy, and the arts. When you use words like democracy, logic, theater, or cosmos, you're speaking echoes of ancient Greece. Eventually, the golden age of Greece gave way to conquest. In the 4th century BCE, Philip of Macedon united the Greek city-states by force. His son, Alexander Great, expanded Greek culture across Asia and North Africa, ushering in the Hellenistic Age, a time when Greek language and ideas mixed with Egyptian, Persian, and Indian cultures. Though Alexander's empire did not last, his influence ensured that Greek thought continued to shape the world long after the political structures had faded. So when we talk about ancient Greece, we're not just talking about a place or a people. We're talking about the roots of philosophy, science, drama, democracy, art, and so much more. A civilization filled with curiosity, ambition, contradiction, and creativity. A world of gods and humans, logic and myth, reason and wonder. The legacy of ancient Greece lives on not just in museums and textbooks, but in the very way we think, speak, and imagine. And perhaps the most incredible fact of all is this. In so many ways, we're still living in the world they dreamed into being. Welcome back to our journey through the world of ancient Greece. If Part 1 uncovered the roots of philosophy, democracy, art, and science, Part 2 dives even deeper into the daily lives of the Greeks, their customs, innovations, superstitions, and the enduring influence of their civilization. Let's begin with something surprisingly practical: plumbing. Ancient Greeks, particularly those in cities like Athens and the island of Crete, developed impressive sanitation systems. Aqueducts brought fresh water to fountains and homes, and some wealthier houses even had ceramic bathtubs and running water, thanks to clay pipes and early drainage systems. The Minoans, who predated classical Greece but are considered part of its ancient tradition, even had flushable toilets as early as 1500 BCE. It's a reminder that Greek innovation wasn't just philosophical. It was also incredibly practical. Now, think of education. While we touched on Athenian and Spartan schooling earlier, it's worth digging deeper. In Athens, education was designed to create well-rounded citizens. Boys learned music, not just as entertainment, but as a form of discipline and harmony. Mathematics was taught not only for commerce, but to understand the universe. Physical education was mandatory, as they believed in the unity of body and mind. Meanwhile, in Sparta, education was militaristic and brutal. Boys were taught to steal food, not because theft was encouraged, but because stealth and survival were essential to their training. If caught, the punishment was severe, not for stealing, but for getting caught. Women, often sidelined in Greek history, had more roles than we might assume. While Athenian women lived under strict domestic expectations, women in other city-states, like Delphi and Sparta, had more freedoms. At Delphi, women served as priestesses of Apollo, including the famed Oracle of Delphi, who played a powerful and spiritual role in society. Her cryptic prophecies influenced kings, generals, and city-states. Though cloaked in mystery, the Oracle was deeply respected, and her words could steer the course of empires. The ancient Greeks also had a fascinating relationship with food and dining. Their diets were based on the Mediterranean triad: wheat, olives, and wine. Bread was a staple, often dipped in wine for breakfast. Olive oil was not just for cooking. It was used in cosmetics, medicine, and even as fuel for lamps. Meat was eaten rarely, usually only during religious festivals. Fish, legumes, figs, grapes, and cheese were common fare. Banquets, known as symposia, weren't just meals. They were intellectual gatherings where men debated philosophy, recited poetry, and drank wine mixed with water. Drinking wine undiluted was seen as uncivilized, a mark of barbarism. Speaking of civilization, ancient Greeks took citizenship seriously. Being a citizen meant more than legal status. It was a way of life. It came with duties: military service, participation in the assembly, and jury duty. Trials were a major public spectacle. Some juries had hundreds of members, chosen by lot, not election. There were no lawyers. Citizens represented themselves. Justice, in theory, was democratic. In practice, it could be chaotic. A good speech could sway the verdict as much as the facts. Now, let's talk about war. The hoplite soldier was the backbone of the Greek army. Heavily armored and carrying a round shield called a hoplon, he fought in a tight formation known as a phalanx. Discipline and unity were essential. The strength of the phalanx was in its cohesion. Wars were brutal, often driven by competition over land, trade, and honor. The Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta lasted nearly 3 decades and devastated much of Greece. Thucydides, a general and historian, chronicled it with a level of objectivity and analysis that still sets the standard for historical writing. Religion was another cornerstone of Greek life. While the Olympian gods were widely worshipped, local deities and hero cults played a major role too. Each city had its own patron deity. Athens had Athena, Corinth had Aphrodite, and so on. People believed gods intervened in daily life, so sacrifices, festivals, and rituals were frequent. Temples weren't just places of worship. They were treasuries, civic centers, and expressions of a city's wealth and piety. Omens and oracles guided important decisions. Even athletes sacrificed to the gods before competitions. Now, the Greek calendar was filled with festivals, many of which combined athletic contests, religious rituals, and drama. The Panathenaic Festival in Athens honored Athena with a grand procession, musical competitions, and athletic games. At the Dionysia, tragedies and comedies were performed before thousands. These weren't just local events. They were pan-Hellenic, drawing visitors from across the Greek world, reinforcing shared identity through culture and religion. Art, too, evolved over time. Early Greek statues were rigid and stylized, but by the classical period, they became more naturalistic. Sculptors like Phidias captured anatomy with astonishing accuracy. Painters, Though fewer works have survived, adorned pottery with scenes of mythology, daily life, and athletic contests. These ceramics weren't just beautiful. They were functional, used for storage, cooking, and ceremony. The black figure and red figure techniques remain iconic styles, each requiring incredible skill and precision. Let's talk architecture again. Beyond the Parthenon, there were thousands of temples, theaters, and public buildings, often constructed with mathematical precision. The Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian orders defined column design and became the blueprint for Western architecture. But even private homes were thoughtfully constructed, featuring central courtyards, andron rooms for male guests, and separate quarters for women. Light and air were valued, as were mosaics and painted walls. The wealthier the household, the more ornate the design. As we near the end of this journey, it's important to consider how ancient Greece was remembered. After its conquest by Rome, Greek culture was not erased, it was absorbed. Roman education, architecture, law, and literature were heavily influenced by Greek precedents. In fact, most of what we know about ancient Greece today comes through Roman lenses. Preserved texts, copied statues, and reimagined myths. During the Renaissance, scholars rediscovered Greek writings, sparking a revival in art, science, and political thought. Today, we still use Greek models to build courts, theaters, and universities. The alphabet we write with, the genres we watch on stage, the logic we apply in science, even the roots of the words we speak. So much comes from ancient Greece. And while modern societies have changed dramatically, the questions the Greeks asked still resonate. What is justice? What is truth? What is beauty? How should we live? Even now, thousands of years later, ancient Greece remains more than a historical curiosity. It is a mirror held up to human nature, showing us our potential, our complexity, and the enduring power of ideas. And that, perhaps, is the most remarkable fact of all. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of ancient Greece. In parts 1 and 2, we explore philosophy, democracy, myth, science, war, daily life, and innovation. Now, in part 3, we turn our attention to the more nuanced aspects of Greek civilization, their intellectual breakthroughs, obscure practices, forgotten achievements, and the enduring fingerprints they left on modern culture. What we're about to uncover might just reshape how you view the ancient Greeks altogether. Let's begin with mathematics and astronomy. Many people know about Pythagoras and his famous theorem, but the full story is even more fascinating. Pythagoras was more than a mathematician. He was a mystic. He founded a religious community that believed in the transmigration of souls and the sacred power of numbers. To the Pythagoreans, math wasn't just a tool. It was a key to the universe's hidden harmony. Their ideas helped form the basis of musical theory, geometry, and eventually Western thought on the structure of the cosmos. Speaking of the cosmos, the Greeks developed surprisingly advanced ideas about astronomy. The philosopher Anaximander proposed that the Earth floated unsupported in space, and he was among the first to attempt a map of the known world. Aristarchus of Samos suggested a heliocentric model of the solar system, nearly 2,000 years before Copernicus. Hipparchus calculated the distance to the moon and laid the foundation for trigonometry. And then there was the Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek analog computer recovered from shipwreck. Built over 2,000 years ago, it could predict eclipses, track planetary movements, and even model the timing of Olympic Games. It remains one of the most mind-blowing artifacts of the ancient world. Let's move from the skies to the seas. While we often focus on Greek land battles and city-states, their prowess as seafarers was just as critical. The Greeks built fast, agile warships called triremes, which featured 3 tiers of rowers and a deadly bronze ram at the bow. Naval power allowed Athens to dominate the Aegean and establish the Delian League, which started as an alliance but eventually became an empire in all but name. Maritime trade brought them into contact with Egypt, Phoenicia, and Persia, making Greece a melting pot of ideas and technology. This cultural exchange influenced everything, from coinage to clothing. Greeks were among the first to mint coins for widespread public use. These coins weren't just currency. They were tools of propaganda, bearing the symbols of gods, heroes, and city emblems. They helped unify regional economies and made long-distance trade more efficient. As for clothing, the Greeks wore simple yet elegant garments like the chiton and himation. Styles vary by region and social status, but functionality and form were equally prized. Greek fashion also emphasized grace and movement, mirroring their admiration of the human form in sculpture. Let's take a moment to consider the role of humor. We often think of ancient literature as serious and grand, but the Greeks also loved comedy, sharp, biting, and deeply political. Aristophanes, known as the father of comedy, used satire to lampoon politicians, philosophers, and even the gods. His plays like The Clouds and Lysistrata weren't just entertainment. They were social commentary. In Lysistrata, women go on a sex strike to force men to end a war. Even today, the play's themes of power, gender, and resistance still resonate. Language and rhetoric were also vital. Public speaking was considered an essential skill, especially in democratic Athens. Young men studied the art of persuasion under sophists, teachers who charged fees to instruct rhetoric, logic, and grammar. Some, like Protagoras, sparked controversy by suggesting that truth was subjective, challenging the very idea of objective reality. Others, like Isocrates and Demosthenes, became legendary orators, shaping public opinion and guiding policy. Their speeches survive today as examples of the enduring power of language. Now let's turn to lesser-known aspects of Greek spirituality. Beyond the Olympian gods, many Greeks participated in mystery religions, secret cults with elaborate initiation rituals. The Eleusinian Mysteries, dedicated to Demeter and Persephone, promise initiates insight into life, death, and rebirth. Though details were closely guarded, participants spoke of profound transformation. These rites hint at a deeper, more personal spiritual life beneath the public ceremonies. Other cults centered around Dionysus, Orpheus, or even foreign deities absorbed into Greek religion, demonstrating a surprising openness to religious fusion. Medicine was another area where the Greeks pushed boundaries. While earlier societies viewed illness as divine punishment, Hippocrates and his followers introduced a rational, observational approach. They believed health was a balance of four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. While that theory is outdated, the method of recording symptoms, observing progress, and applying ethics laid the groundwork for modern clinical practice. The Hippocratic Oath, in its many forms, is still taken by doctors today, a direct link to ancient Greece's legacy of care. Time to shine a light on architecture again. While temples get all the glory, Greeks also innovated in infrastructure. They engineered tunnels through mountains, like the Tunnel of Eupalinos on Samos, a marvel of ancient engineering completed from both ends with remarkable precision. They designed agoras, or public squares, as multipurpose civic centers. They built gymnasiums and palaestri for exercise and education. And don't forget the Stoa, covered walkways lined with columns, perfect for shaded discussions, business, and leisurely strolls. Even Greek agriculture was advanced. Faced with rocky soil and a hot climate, they adapted by cultivating olives, grapes, and barley, crops that thrive in the Mediterranean. They used terracing, irrigation, and crop rotation to maximize yields. Agricultural festivals like Desmophoria honored Demeter and celebrated fertility and abundance. These weren't just religious events. They reinforced community bonds and rural identity in an increasingly urban world. Now, one of the most enduring and paradoxical aspects of ancient Greece is their concept of beauty. The Greeks had a term, kalokagathia, which linked physical beauty with moral virtue. They believed that a beautiful body reflected a noble soul. This belief permeated everything, from athletics to sculpture to everyday life. It shaped their architecture, their literature, even their political ideals. And while this emphasis could exclude those who didn't meet certain standards, it also inspired a cultural pursuit of excellence, what they called arete, that became a cornerstone of their identity. Let's not overlook education's impact on culture. Greek used memorized poetry, debated ethics, and studied the natural world. Music and athletics were as important as reading and writing. For the Greeks, a full education wasn't just knowledge. It was formation of character. The ultimate goal was not just to know, but to live wisely, beautifully, and justly. Welcome once again to our continuing exploration of ancient Greece. In previous episodes, we traced the roots of democracy, philosophy, art, science, warfare, and daily life. Now, in this fourth installment, we'll investigate how the legacy of ancient Greece not only shaped the ancient world, but continues to live on in our modern institutions, cultural ideals, and intellectual pursuits. From the blueprints of democracy to the language of science, the Greek legacy is not just something we study, it's something we still live every day. Let's begin with government. While the Athenian democracy was limited, it excluded women, slaves, and foreigners. It introduced the revolutionary idea that citizens could directly shape laws and policy. The Athenian assembly, known as the ecclesia, was a space where any male citizen could speak and vote. The concept of majority rule, public debate, and civic responsibility all stem from this early experiment. Though modern democracies are representative rather than direct, the structure of legislative bodies, the role of public discourse, and the emphasis on civic duty all echo Greek innovation. The Greeks also contributed deeply to the foundation of Western legal thought. While not codified in the way Roman law was, Greek legal practices introduced ideas like trial by jury, legal defense speeches, and the presumption of some basic rights. In Athens, large juries, sometimes with 500 or more citizens, ensured that no single person held too much influence. The concept that law should be applied equally, that justice must be argued and defended, and that citizens should be protected from arbitrary rule are all principles that still undergird modern legal systems. Next, let's examine language. So many English words have Greek origins that the language is sometimes referred to as the mother tongue of Western thought. Words like democracy, philosophy, architecture, biology, theater, and astronomy all trace back to Greek roots. Scientific and medical terminology still leans heavily on Greek. For example, cardiology, heart study, neurology, nerve study, photography, light writing, and geology, earth study. Even prefixes and suffixes, like micro dash, mega dash, logi, and cracy, serve as linguistic fossils of Greek intellect, embedded in our everyday speech. Architecture is another visible legacy. The Greek architectural orders, Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian, are still replicated in buildings across the world. From courthouses and museums to universities and state capitals, Greek columns and proportions define a classical aesthetic associated with democracy, stability, and enlightenment. The use of symmetry, geometry, and balance in design began with Greek temples and persists in modern architecture. When you walk past a neoclassical building, you're walking through a visual conversation with ancient Greece. Turning to sports, the Olympic Games are perhaps the most obvious Greek export. First held in 776 BCE in Olympia, the ancient games were a religious festival in honor of Zeus. Athletes competed nude, showcasing not just physical strength, but the cultural ideal of the well-formed body. The modern revival of the Olympics in 1896 paid homage to this legacy. Today's games, with their torch relays, odes, and international spirit, reflect not just athletic excellence, but a global celebration of human achievement. Rooted in Greek tradition, theater, too, owes a massive debt to Greece. The very concept of drama, of scripted stories performed for an audience, originated with Greek tragedies and comedies. Playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides explored themes of fate, justice, love, and betrayal in ways that still resonate. Their use of dialogue, chorus, and moral conflict laid the groundwork for every form of dramatic storytelling that followed. Modern cinema, television, and even video games owe a conceptual lineage to Greek dramatic structure. If you've ever seen a hero confront their tragic flaw, you're witnessing the legacy of Greek drama. In the world of philosophy, Greek thinkers continue to guide our quest for understanding. Socrates' insistence on questioning assumptions became the foundation of critical thinking. Plato's ideas about ideal forms and the nature of reality still spark debate. Aristotle's logic, ethics, and classifications helped define entire academic disciplines. These thinkers didn't offer easy answers. They trained people to ask better questions. Today, their writings are core curriculum in philosophy, political science, psychology, and ethics. Their ideas form the DNA of intellectual inquiry in the Western world. Science and mathematics, too, bear the indelible stamp of Greek thought. Euclid's Elements remain the standard geometry text for over 2,000 years. Archimedes made discoveries in physics and engineering that were centuries ahead of his time. Galen's medical writings, though later revised, formed the backbone of Western medicine through the Middle Ages. The Greek method of hypothesis, observation, and logical deduction eventually inspired the scientific revolution. The legacy isn't just what they knew, it's how they sought knowledge that matters. Let's take a step into education. The ancient Greeks believed that education was not merely vocational but existential. It was about cultivating the soul. The liberal arts, which form a foundation of many modern university programs, stem directly from Greek educational ideals. Grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, the original 7 liberal arts, were studied to create a well-rounded citizen. Education was about forming not just a worker or a specialist, but a thinker, a participant in the civic and intellectual life of the community. Even in art, the influence endures. The Greek focus on human anatomy, balance, and motion revolutionized sculpture and painting. Renaissance artists like Michelangelo and Da Vinci were directly inspired by Greek statues, studying them to better capture the human form. The Greek artistic principle of mimesis, or imitation of life, pushed artists to portray the natural world with increasing realism and emotion. Modern art continues to grapple with the balance between idealism and realism, a conversation that began in ancient Greece. Let's not overlook ethics and morality. The Greek exploration of virtue, what it means to live well, to act justly, to pursue excellence, forms the basis of many ethical frameworks used today. Aristotle's concept of the golden mean, the idea that virtue lies between extremes, is still taught in ethics courses around the world. The Stoics, while later Roman in prominence, build on Greek foundations to teach the value of resilience, rationality, and inner peace. These ideas influence modern psychology, therapy, and even mindfulness practices. Even politics owes a debt to Greek divisions and discourse. The tension between oligarchy and democracy, between central authority and local autonomy, between populism and aristocracy, these were real debates in Greek city-states. The Federalist Papers, Enlightenment philosophers, and even modern constitutions echo the dilemmas first posed by Plato and Aristotle. Greek history offers both inspiration and caution. The brilliance of democratic ideals and the fragility of human institutions.